Hey guys, so today's video is going to be a little bit of a different format, as you might be able to tell. It's not going to be edited or anything like that. It's more going to be coming from a stream of consciousness, because as you can see, I am in my car, I'm in my truck, and I had the strong urge to pull over and record this and talk about this. Because this is the topic of this video, and what we're going to be going over is something that has been brought up often this week, and it's one that gets brought up often, and that is, what do we do, or how do we deal with feelings of impatience when manifesting? And what do we do, how do we deal with feelings of perfectionism, feeling like we need to be perfect at this? These two questions might seem different, but they really do go hand in hand with each other. So this is an incredibly important thing to discuss. It's something that many people struggle with. So I want to address that today. And first and foremost, before diving into the meat of this video, I do want to give you guys a quick heads up and a quick announcement about my group coaching program that starts this Monday, August 8th. I am still accepting applications. We are going to be enrolling officially this weekend, and this is going to be all encompassing. I've been working on this program for the better part of a year now, and in it, covering every aspect of manifestation and conscious creation, and ultimately how to detach from this concept of self that is holding us back from what we desire, because that is ultimately the aim, no matter what it is we desire to manifest. The aim is detachment from the old self. So I've got links down in the description box if you want to get more information. If you want to sign up, definitely do so down below, and I will hopefully see you all guys there. So with all that said, let's dive into how to combat the feelings that we get from the 3D. What do we do when we are feeling frustrated? What do we do when we're feeling impatient? What do we do when we feel like we're just waiting and waiting and waiting? And what do we do if it feels like we have to be perfect at this, and we give ourselves a hard time because we feel like we're screwing up at this? All of these things go hand in hand, as I said earlier, and it's something that virtually everybody struggles with. I would argue that this is probably the biggest thing when it comes to manifestation, when it comes to consciously creating our 3D experience. This is the most challenging thing, and the most challenging aspect that we face is, what do we do in this 3D interim? What do we do between point A and B? Because that's where we're most susceptible to our fears and doubts and our limiting beliefs. And that right there is at the root of why we battle those feelings of impatience and frustration, and why we feel like we need to be perfect at this, why we feel like we have to be this perfectionist in how we approach manifestation, that it's got to be perfect. That's driven from the fear of failure. And it's driven from that fear of the unknown, because what we can't see with our physical senses, what we can't measure or dictate on the outside, it leaves us in a place of feeling very vulnerable. And that is at the crux of why we struggle with this. Because we've been conditioned our whole entire lives to react and respond to the 3D. We are experiencing this life and playing out these human roles in the 3D. So to turn our attention away from it and to ignore the 3D is one of the biggest challenges that people face. And I know I certainly did. And I would even go to say, anyone who claims otherwise, anyone who said that they didn't struggle with this, I would question that, because of how conditioned we are and because of how attached we are to 3D circumstances. But ultimately, the reason why we have these feelings and the reason why we have these struggles boils down to fear of failure, fear of the unknown, and lack of faith and doubt. Maybe we don't truly believe that we have the capability of doing this. We may believe in the law. We may truly, 100% subscribe to this. Maybe we've seen it play out in our own lives. But when it comes down to having complete and full faith in ourselves as the creator, that's something that many people grapple with as well. So one of the things I also want to do in this video is talk about some ways to combat this, specifically 3 different ways that I did and that I used to help me overcome these attachments to the 3D and these fears and doubts and frustrations that came up because of lack of movement or movement in the wrong direction when it came to outside of us. And again, this is the most common thing in the world. So one thing that I often see people do, and the first thing that I want to note, and that is really, really important to always keep in mind, is, I've said it a million times, I'm going to say it a million more times, but we need to remember that we're always manifesting. We're always doing this. Most of the time, it's not consciously. So what I hear a lot of people say is, Missy, nothing is manifesting. I'm not manifesting. Why am I not manifesting? And right away, that's not true. I can say with complete certainty that that's not true. Because again, we're always manifesting. We are always seeing the reflection of the internal states on the outside. That's all the 3D is. The 3D is nothing more than the external reflection of what we are embodying, the beliefs and assumptions that we carry. Whether it's movement or no movement, it is a manifestation nonetheless. So it's important to note that, because the first thing that I did, and then the first thing that I want to make note of what to do to overcome this, is self-observation. And I talked about this a little bit in my live stream that I did the other day, a couple days ago. And this was where there was a couple people in my Facebook group that had brought these questions up to me. And so I discussed it on the live stream, but I truly don't feel like I was able to have enough time to give that justice, to give this topic justice, because of how important it is, because of the scope, the magnitude of how much this affects people. This is the biggest challenge that we face when it comes to creating our desires, creating our reality. And so the first step and the first thing to ultimately overcoming this is self-observation. It's mental diet. And when I say mental diet, I don't mean the flipping of the thoughts. I don't mean the flippening. That's not what mental diet means. What I mean is a non-judgmental, careful observation of the self. And this was actually the first step in Neville's fundamentals, what he described as the fundamentals to manifestation. We need to become more aware of where we are dwelling in consciousness at any given time. Because one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, and again, I was super guilty of this too, is we're treating manifestation as if it's just this box ticking exercise. Like it's this, application that we're only using sparingly to get something. And if this is how you're approaching it, then you're going to see little to no movement in your 3D, because this is the wrong approach. This is not something that we're only doing if we're in sats, or we're only doing if we're affirming or scripting or using any variety of technique. This isn't all the time. This comes as naturally to you and to all of us as breathing. We're always doing it. So as creators, as conscious creators, and arguably unconscious creators most of the time, we're not aware of why things are manifesting in the way that they are, or why they're not showing up. But again, movement or no movement is still a manifestation. And specifically, when we're talking about no movement, if it seems like things are stagnant, if it seems like things have not moved in a very long time, that is a manifestation that results from our own double-mindedness. And it can be especially frustrating if we're not conscious of why things are not showing up. That is why we get so impatient. We get so impatient and frustrated because we don't understand why it's not showing up. Why is it not coming to pass when I've been doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing? I'm doing all the techniques. I'm living in the end. I script and affirm every day. I always, go to bed in the wish fulfilled. And yet there's zero movement. Now, granted, just because there's no movement doesn't mean that there's nothing happening. There's always things happening behind the scenes. There's always bridges that are unfolding for us. But if it feels like it's been a particularly long time without any sign of movement, without a peep from that desired outcome, you can bet it is from our own double-mindedness. It's from our own hot and cold behavior. When we feel confident one moment, when we feel like we got this and it's in the bag and we're in that end state, and then a moment later we've fallen out of it and we're depressed and we're angry and we're fearful and we're uncertain, that sort of back and forth is going to materialize in what looks like to us a time lag. So the importance of self-observation comes in that we can start seeing what we are doing that is holding things up, so to speak, or what reason is as to why the manifestation isn't coming, or why it's not here yet, or why perhaps we're manifesting things that we don't want. 90% of the time, we're running on autopilot. So we're not usually conscious of why something manifests in the way that it does, because we weren't aware of that seed when it was planted. But the more that you implement self-observation, and the more that you become aware of the self and what you're doing, you will see it. It will become clear as day as to why this is showing up in the way that it is now. Guaranteed. We need to become, throughout our day-to-day, just stop what you're doing and check in with yourself. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts? What are your moods? Inner conversations. What is the internal dialogue you're having? Are you talking to somebody internally? Is it a lovely conversation, or is it fighting? Is it argumentative? Is it you giving yourself a hard time. See, it is the inner state that is going to be that what shows up in the outside. And that's Law of Assumption 101. So first step in overcoming any feeling of impatience, any feeling of frustration with the 3D is start becoming more aware of the state you're occupying throughout the day, or the states you're occupying throughout the day, because we do move in and out of states all the time. But then you're also going to get familiar with the dominant state, or the state that you occupy more often than not. And it's that state, it's the dominant state, and it's where we frequent the most often, that's going to determine the 3D circumstance. So that's number one. Number two is detachment. And this is also something that I talked about briefly during the live stream. And it's one that I wanted to elaborate on a little bit more, because I did get some questions about what I meant by detachment. I was talking about detachment exercises and things that we can do. So when I talk about detachment, and this is also a topic that people get confused about often, when I talk about detachment, I'm not talking about letting go of the desire itself. And that's what a lot of people think it means. So there's a lot of aversion that people have when we talk about detachment, because in a lot of people's minds that means that we're saying just let it go, just drop that desire, drop that specific person, and move on. And that's not what that means. That's not at all what that means. Detachment is turning your attention away from what you don't want. It is detaching yourself from the state of consciousness that you do not want to dwell in. Detachment is turning your focus away from the desiring or the wanting and the craving and the longing and all of the things that imply lack, that imply that we do not have the thing that we desire. We do not want to stay attached to this, and unfortunately for many of us, we are very much attached. We are attached to our limiting beliefs, our fears, and our doubts, and all of the things that keep us in a state of lack and of not having. This is what we want to detach from. And there's many different ways that you can go about this, but I think the easiest one to implement, the one that's going to be the most simple, is just practicing where you keep your focus, where you are keeping your attention. And it goes hand in hand with the self-observation. So as soon as you become aware that you're entertaining something that you shouldn't be, or that you're entertaining something that you don't want, as soon as you become observant of that, turn the attention away from it. Do not keep insisting on dwelling in it. There's a sort of cathartic feeling that comes from wallowing in our feelings and being sad. But regardless, we don't want to do this. It may feel really good to tell somebody off in our mind if we're mad at them. It may feel really good, and we may have a strong desire to just keep fighting with them and telling them what's what in imagination. But this is the last thing that we want to entertain. As soon as you become aware that this is what you're doing, redirect. Now, again, this does not mean that we have to sit there and affirm a bunch of positive affirmations right on that spot every time we notice a negative thought. No. That can lead to resistance if we're not careful. That there can be a lot of pushback from doing that if we're not careful. This just means that we are conscious of what we are giving our attention to. That's it. And filling our consciousness and filling awareness with only the things that we desire to experience, if nothing else. Because again, this is something that doesn't come naturally for most of us. Most of us are very much conditioned to dwelling on what we don't want, giving all of our mental energy and focus to the problem at hand, and all of the things that are wrong, and all of the things that, again, we do not desire to see. But by giving your focus and attention to the problem, you are just blowing up the problem bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's going to keep perpetuating, no matter what. So anything that we can do to just practice turning our attention away. One thing that really helps me, one thing that definitely in the beginning helped me, was I created a list of things to keep myself busy with. And that's another really good thing that can help with detachment. Turn your attention onto something else and keep yourself as busy and occupied as possible. If we are sitting alone, bored, with nothing to do, that's when we're most susceptible to all of these negative thoughts and feelings and emotions. So make a list of things that you enjoy and that things that you want to do in your day-to-day. It's simple things, non-significant things. Like for me, I like to study different languages. I like to bake new things. I like to make food because food is awesome. So there's things that we can do to sort of occupy our mind and keep our focus on the thing, just anything other than what we don't want. And that is key. It's taking our focus and putting it on literally anything other than what we don't want. So make a list of things that you enjoy doing or that you would like to learn. Whether that's, history, whether that's a certain topic, whether that's astronomy, it doesn't matter. We just want to have ideas of things that we can do so that if we catch ourselves reminiscing on the thing that we don't want, we can redirect as quickly as possible and keep our mind somewhere that is going to be busy, so that we're not dwelling again, so we're not slipping back into that old state of what we don't want, that old story. That's incredibly important, and it does get easier the more that we practice it. And the third and final thing that is going to help you tremendously when it comes to dealing with frustrations of the 3D, dealing with feelings of impatience, is building our faith. Build your trust and faith in the law. Because this doesn't come naturally and easily for everyone. It's important to remember that how we were taught, for the vast majority of us, how we were taught, what we were taught, is in stark contrast to the law. We are very conditioned and very trusting in the 3D. At a deeper subconscious level, we believe it's a 3D that's the real world, and that imagination is make-believe. So we have this perfect breeding ground for fear and uncertainty and doubt. And it's going to feel very challenging to suspend your disbelief completely and go completely on a limb here. The fear of failure and fear of disappointment is going to feel incredibly strong at times. So, how do we get over this? As Neville would always say, we need to test the law. We need to put this to the test and build our faith. Because if we had 1000% conviction in the law, if there was no way to phase us, we were so certain that this was true, we would not be reacting to the 3D in the way that we are. So even if we believe in the law, there's something on a deeper level that is not entirely buying that pearl, so to speak. We're not completely convinced in our ability to consciously manifest. So we get around this by proving it to ourselves. And I will say that a common way that people talk about testing the law, and one that I certainly talk about a lot, is to create a list of things, small things, seemingly insignificant things, that we can, manifest and start showing ourselves and proving to ourselves that we are in fact creating, because we have no attachment to these things. And without the attachment, it's going to come to pass much faster and with less effort. But this isn't the best way to go about it sometimes for some people. Now, I had tremendous luck with this, with going about testing this way. I saw many things come to pass relatively quickly. But for some people, even though the things themselves are not significant, there is a significance of needing to see this in order to convince yourself that this is real. So if we're not careful, there can be a lot of conditions and a lot of significance that we put on this, which in turn can make it so it's it's difficult to see these things come to pass. So a way to make this feel more natural, another way to test the law that is going to come about more naturally for you, is to not even try to test this. We're not trying to manifest anyways, but instead of creating a list of things to see, just note your behavior, note your thoughts, note your inner conversations, self-observation, and then also be taking note of the 3D circumstances. And if you do this for 1 week and you are super attentive, you're going to see a correlation between the two. You're going to see that connection between what you are thinking, what you are imagining, and what is happening externally. You can also go back in your past of the things that have happened and the things that you have experienced in certain times in certain areas of your life, and what were the thoughts and beliefs and convictions that you had. And once again, you're going to see that they line up perfectly. So this is just another way to put the law to the test with less pressure and less effort. And that's important, because the number one reason that we fail is because we're trying too hard. We are trying too hard to manifest. And that goes hand in hand with the perfectionism, feeling like we need to be perfect at this. But this isn't trying to do anything. We're not trying to do. We're not trying to make this the art of doing. This is the art of being. This is the art of becoming. And though it may sound like those are similar, there is a distinction between those two. That is the difference between success and failure. Manifestation is a natural process. It comes as it flows. There is no trying to force it. There's no trying to make it happen. And so if you're noting that this is what you're doing, you gotta take your hands off of that wheel. You got to learn the art of becoming and the art of allowing. And we do this through practicing, going into imagination and living in that end, and not from the stance of trying to get something. We're not imagining only to achieve something or only to obtain something. We're doing it to experience what that feels like. We go into imagination and we go and live in the wish fulfilled to experience what that feels like. Because that feeling is the means to the ends. There's no need to stress about how you're applying the technique and how many times you're looping your scene or how many affirmations to say. None of those things matter. Truly. What matters is the conviction that we hold about this imaginal act. Can you feel it? How does it feel? Does it feel something that you are confident in happening? Are you able to suspend the 3D world and just go into imagination? Because it feels amazing to do that. That is the art of being. We're going within to experience the person that we desire to become. And that is going to be one of the biggest keys between success and quote-unquote failure. So I see this video is already 30 minutes long. Whoops, did not mean to ramble on that much, but I really, really wanted to make sure that I expanded on this topic further, because though I covered it in the live session the other day, it really did warrant its own video. This is something that virtually everyone has struggled with, and I've gotten this similar questions daily, on the daily. So applying these 3 things in your life, self-observation, detachment, and building your faith, you will be unstoppable. Nothing will be able to penetrate. Nothing will get in your way ever again. Apply these and see what happens. Your life will change. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Again, I know this was kind of a weird setup, no editing involved. I just wanted to shoot this straight from the hip and really get this out there. But I hope you enjoyed it. Obviously, if you did, do me a solid, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you're into more about conscious creation, if you want to learn more about conscious creation, and definitely be sure to check out more. I've got tons of resources down in that description box for all things Neville Goddard, more things about the law of assumption, so don't forget to dig into that. But you guys, I much love to all of you. No matter what is going on, ultimately don't ever forget how powerful you truly are. Don't ever forget who you really are. Much love to all of you, and as always, happy manifesting, guys.